Marxism deals with the high level of inequality in the world. Marxism can be divided into two equally important theories in international relations. But before going to Marxism or Neo-Marxism, we have to understand how much unequal the world really is. According to Oxfam report of 2020, top 1% has twice as much wealth as the rest of the humanity combined. Out of them, only 162 billionaires have wealth equal to the bottom half of the humanity. An analogy has been made in the same report explaining this wealth inequality. If $100 bills are piled up one above the other and people are made to sit on how much wealth they own, then majority of the population of the globe would be sitting on the floor as they have little wealth. A middle class person from a developed country would be sitting at a chair height, and the richest person, he would be in the space. This is what the inequality looks like. Wealth inequality is not bad in its nature, but when there is so much wealth inequality as it has been now, things become problematic. Marxism defines this inequality in terms of the exploitation of the poor people by the rich. Karl Marx explained it by saying that a privileged few people, that he termed bourgeoisie, they exploit the labor of the rest of the population, that he called proletariat, that those few people are responsible to make this wealth inequality, and they make the people work on their lands or in their factories or in any way, and this generates the income or wealth inequality. Major philosophers of Marxism, classical Marxism, are Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Vladimir Lenin. Now, when we compare Marxism to other classical theories of international relations that are liberalism and realism, the primary actor in realism are the sovereign states. In liberalism, the primary actors are the individuals. But in Marxism, in classical Marxism, the primary actor is the social class. It is the social class that matters according to classical Marxism. Now, Marxism makes the structure of the society in such a way that it has a base and a superstructure. The structure has a base and then a superstructure above it. The base is economic, and the superstructure that has everything that is not economic. The base shapes the superstructure, how it looks like, how it would be. And then the superstructure, the political superstructure, influences the base, that is economy. And it influences in such a way that it maintains the status quo. Because status quo suits the privileged few, that are the bourgeoisie. And hence, since the status quo suits the bourgeoisie or the rich people would never want to give up their hold and power on economic resources. And hence, according to Marxism, a society needs a revolution in order to end this wealth inequality. Evolution has no place in Marxism. According to Marxism, the rich and the poor are always in a state of conflict. The status quo suits the rich and it does not suit the poor. According to Marxism, the rich and the poor can simply not coexist in the same environment. Vladimir Lenin was very much against capitalism as well as imperialism. He considered imperialism to be the root cause of World War I and he called imperialism to be the highest stage of capitalism or the final stage of capitalism. According to him, if the world needed to stay away from a second world war, the world needed to fix the root cause, that is capitalism. And according to him, the world needed communist revolutions throughout the globe. Now, the classical realism focuses solely on the societies or social class. When in the 20th century industrialization boomed at a rate hitherto unseen, and it created differences in economies of the world, as we know that the number of countries increased a lot in 20th century. So a new concept was derived from Marxism, that is Neo-Marxism. And Neo-Marxism gave us some very useful terms that are repeatedly used today, like third world countries or countries at the center and at the periphery, or the core countries and developing world. These terms have been attributed to Neo-Marxism. So what does Neo-Marxism basically says? Neo-Marxism points out the difference in the economic wealth of countries at the global north and the global south. According to Marxism, the global north is developing at the expense of the global south. And even within global north or within global south, some countries are exploiting other countries. The two major theories that can be talked about in Neo-Marxism are the theory proposed by Wallerstein, that is world system theory, and another one is dependency theory. Let's talk a short about them. The theory by Wallerstein, that is world system theory, it divides the world into countries in three terms, like the countries that are at the core, countries that are at the periphery, and the middle stage countries that are developing, like they are in the semi-periphery. The core countries that are highly developed, like the Western European countries or USA, Canada, or for instance Australia. And the countries at the periphery, they are the poorest countries. Their economies are usually based on agriculture or raw material. And the countries at the core, they extract their resources to make themselves rich at the expense of the countries of the periphery. The major countries that can come into the category of periphery are like countries in the Africa and Afghanistan or Yemen, or countries of this sort. And semi-periphery countries, and they are in the middle stage, like we can say Brazil or India. And the other theory that can be related to it is the dependency theory. Dependency theory divides the world into four categories. Countries that are at the center of the center. Center means center is rich, okay? And then the periphery that are outside the center, that are the poor countries. So when we talk about center of the center, they are the very rich countries, and they can be USA or Germany, France, England, countries of this sort. Then countries, the second category is periphery of the center. They are the countries that are economies are less developed than the countries of center, but still they are very. And then there comes the category of countries at the periphery of the center. These countries are like developing, and India can come under it, or Brazil, Argentina, or this sort. And then the poorest countries come, that are periphery of the periphery. They are the African countries, or Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, countries of this sort. Now, the very important thing to be noted is this, that every category, like every category above the lower one, extracts the resources of all the lower categories. Like countries at the center of the center make themselves rich at the expense of all the lower categories. So the countries at the periphery of the periphery are exploited by all other countries, and that is the reason they cannot develop much. How Neo-Marxism explains the relation between the countries is this, that the developed countries cooperate with each other in order to maintain the status quo because it suits them, and the underdeveloped countries, they want to break the status quo, and the fight goes on, as classical Marxism says that the rich and poor cannot coexist peacefully at one time. And one important thing to note, that the developed countries use multinational corporations as their instrument to extract the resources and wealth of the poor countries. A very good book in this regard is Capitalism's Achilles Heel. One must read this book to understand deeply how the poor countries cannot become rich, because capitalism is one of the reasons, the wrongful use of capitalism by the developed world to keep those countries poor. And one thing we can note in this regard, regarding MNCs, that developed countries also pay or give aid to underdeveloped countries, but this economic aid does not help them, because this economic aid is not only economic aid, but politically it is very important. It comes with some dictations, we can say. New Marxism is very important to understand, that why it is so that the global south has a population of 80% of the globe, and yet it contributes to global GDP equal to only 45%, and global north with population of 20% of the world has a share of 55% in the global GDP. How is it so? Neo-Marxism explains this very well.